The Apache's rotors screamed through the canyon as 6 fighter jets closed in for the kill. Lieutenant Colonel Alexandra Reaper Riley's laughter crackled across the radio frequency, freezing the blood of every pilot who heard it. "You boys brought jets to a helicopter fight." Her voice dripped with deadly amusement. "Big mistake." In the next 17 minutes, she would rewrite everything the military thought it knew about aerial combat. The jets had every advantage: speed, altitude, firepower. They just didn't know they were already dead. Welcome to the story that changed modern warfare forever. I'm taking you into the cockpit of the most devastating upset in aviation history. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this incredible story travels, and buckle up, because what you're about to hear will blow your mind. The sun was bleeding crimson across the Afghan mountains when Alexandra Riley first spotted the dust trails. Through her Apache's thermal imaging system, 6 Navy SEALs were pinned down in a ravine, taking heavy fire from 3 directions. Their extraction had gone sideways. What should have been a routine grab of a high-value target had turned into a death trap. "Ghost Lead, this is Reaper 1. Alex's voice cut through the static. "I've got eyes on your position, counting at least 40 hostiles closing in." "Reaper, thank God." The SEAL team leader's voice was tight with controlled panic. "We're black on ammo, 2 wounded. They've got RPGs moving up the ridge." Alex's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, her Apache longbow responding instantly. The 30mm chain gun beneath her cockpit swiveled, tracking targets through the integrated helmet and display sighting system. Every movement of her head directed death. "Copy that, Ghost Lead. Danger close fire mission coming in hot." She squeezed the trigger. The Apache shuddered as the chain gun roared to life, sending a stream of high-explosive rounds into the enemy positions. Bodies flew apart, rock formations disintegrated. The first mini-climax hit as an RPG team she'd missed fired at her, the rocket screaming past her cockpit, close enough that she could see the stabilizing fins spinning. "Shit!" Alex yanked the cyclic hard, left the Apache rolling violently. Her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Boomer Thompson, grunted against the G-forces. "That was too damn close, Colonel." "Just getting warmed up, Boomer." She brought the Apache around, locking a Hellfire missile onto the RPG position. The missile leaped from its rail with a whoosh that shook the airframe. 3 seconds later, the entire hillside erupted in flame. Then her threat warning system exploded into chaos. "Missile lock! Missile lock!" the automated voice screamed. But this wasn't from the ground. 6 fast-moving contacts appeared on her radar, approaching from the north at Mach 1.2. "Reaper 1, this is AWACS Skywatch," a new voice crackled through her headset. "You've got 6 hostile fast movers inbound your position, identified as 4 MiG-29s and 2 Su-27 flankers. Recommend immediate RTB. Return to base." Alex's jaw clenched. The SEALs were still trapped below. "Negative, Skywatch. I've got friendlies in contact. Time to target 3 minutes. Reaper, you're ordered to evacuate immediately. A single Apache cannot..." She cut the transmission. 3 minutes. Her mind raced through the calculations. The enemy ground forces would overrun the SEALs in 5. If she left now, 6 American warriors would die. "Boomer, you hearing this?" "Yeah, and I'm also hearing my mom telling me not to play in traffic. Those are fighter jets, Alex. We're flying a helicopter." A grim smile crossed her face. "My dad flew helicopters in Vietnam. You know what he told me about fighting jets? That it's suicide, that everything's impossible until someone does it." The memory hit her hard and fast. Colonel James Demon Riley, standing in their backyard in Texas, pointing at a hawk circling high above. "See that hawk, Alex? Everyone thinks he owns the sky because he flies highest. But you know what kills hawks." 8-year-old Alex had shaken her head. "Cleverness. her father had said, tapping his temple. The mouse that thinks like a hunter. The fighter jets were 2 minutes out now. On the ground, she could see the SEALs' muzzle flashes growing more sporadic. They were almost out of ammunition. Ghost Lead Reaper 1, I need you to pop smoke and hunker down. Things are about to get interesting. Reaper, we've got nothing left. Trust me, 60 seconds. Alex dove the Apache toward the canyon floor, the airspeed indicator climbing past its never-exceed speed. The airframe shook violently. Warning lights flashed across her instrument panel. Behind her, Boomer was praying in Spanish. Never a good sign. She pulled up hard at the last second, using the canyon walls to mask her heat signature. The Apache's rotor blades churned the air just 50 feet above the rocky ground, kicking up a dust storm that obscured everything. Skywatch Reaper 1. What's the fighter's altitude? Angels 20,000 feet and descending. Reaper, what are you? She switched to the guard frequency, the one she knew the enemy pilots would be monitoring. Attention approaching aircraft, she said in accented English, deliberately adding a tremor to her voice. This is U.S. Army helicopter. We are medical evacuation flight. Please do not fire. The response came immediately in heavily accented English with unmistakable arrogance. American helicopter, this is Viper Lead. You are in violation of restricted airspace. You will land immediately or be destroyed. Please. Alex let panic creep into her voice. We have wounded. We're just trying to... Laughter crackled across the frequency. Multiple voices all amused. Stupid Americans sending helicopter to fight, like sending sheep to fight wolves. That's when Alexandra Riley laughed. It wasn't nervous laughter. It wasn't fearful laughter. It was the cold, predatory sound of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The kind of laugh that made grown men check their six and wonder if they'd made a terrible mistake. Wolves! Her voice dropped an octave, all pretense gone. Boys, I'm about to teach you why Apache pilots are called Reapers. She killed the radio and looked at her tactical display. The jets had descended to 15,000 feet, spreading into an attack formation. Perfect. Boomer Master arm on. All weapons hot. Alex, this is insane. We can't. We can and we will. You know why. She pulled the Apache into a near vertical climb, the engines screaming in protest. Because they think we can't. The first MiG pilot saw the Apache rising toward him and almost laughed again. The stupid American was actually climbing to meet them. His radar locked onto the slow-moving helicopter instantly. This would be like shooting a paper airplane with a cannon. Viper 3 Fox 2, he announced, firing an infrared-guided missile. Alex was already moving. She'd learned long ago that fighter pilots had two critical weaknesses they thought in straight lines, and they always underestimated helicopters. The missile streaked toward her at Mach 3. At the last possible second, she performed a maneuver that shouldn't have been possible, cutting the engines and letting the Apache fall backward, the rotor blades auto-rotating. The missile screamed past its proximity fuse, failing to detonate because it had been programmed for aircraft-sized targets, not the narrow profile of a falling helicopter. What the bus? Viper 3's transmission cut off as Alex restarted the engines and snap-rolled the Apache 90 degrees, bringing her weapons systems to bear. The Hellfire missile she fired wasn't designed for air-to-air combat. But at this range, with the MiG diving straight at her, it didn't matter. The missile impacted the MiG's left intake. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the jet transformed into a fireball, raining burning debris across the canyon. Viper 3 is down. Viper 3 is down. The radio exploded into chaos. 5 remaining jets scattered their formation, dissolving. They'd expected easy prey. They'd found a predator. Alex dove back toward the canyon, using the terrain like a shield. A Su-27 rolled in behind her, its 30mm cannon spitting tracers. Rounds impacted the Apache's armor plating, spiderwebbing the reinforced glass. Boomer shouted something unintelligible. She yanked the cyclic hard right, sliding the Apache sideways through the air, a move that would have torn most helicopters apart. The Su-27 overshot, and for one critical second it was directly in front of her. The Apache's chain gun thundered. 30mm explosive rounds walked up the flanker's fuselage, finding the sweet spot where the wing met the body. Hydraulic fluid sprayed, catching fire instantly. The pilot ejected as his aircraft spiraled into the mountainside. "Two down," Alex muttered, checking her ammunition. 3 Hellfires left half her cannon rounds remaining, and 2 Stinger missiles she'd been saving. The remaining 4 jets regrouped, climbing to altitude. They'd learned their lesson about getting close. Now they'd try to pick her off from range. "Reaper, this is Skywatch. Confirm, did you just shoot down 2 fighter jets? Little busy right now, Skywatch?" She could see them on radar forming up for a coordinated attack. This time they wouldn't underestimate her. This time they'd come in from multiple angles, giving her nowhere to hide. The ground battle below hadn't stopped. The SEALs were making their last stand, completely surrounded. If she climbed to engage the jets, the ground forces would overrun them. If she stayed low to provide fire support, the jets would destroy her. "Boomer, remember that thing we practiced, but swore we'd never actually try? The thing that violates every principle of aerodynamics and common sense. That's the one. We're going to die. Maybe. But what a way to go." She pushed the Apache's nose down and accelerated toward the SEAL position, flying straight and level, making herself the perfect target. Every instinct screamed at her to evade, to hide, to run. Instead, she broadcast on an open frequency. "Hey boys, I'm right here. Come and get me." The jets took the bait. All 4 rolled in simultaneously, missiles locking onto the Apache from 4 different directions. In her helmet display, Alex could see the countdown to impact: 10 seconds. 9 seconds. She fired both Stinger missiles not at the jets, but straight up into the air. 7 seconds. The Apache reached the SEAL position. "Danger close, everybody down." 5 seconds. She fired all 3 remaining Hellfires into the enemy ground positions, while simultaneously deploying every bit of chaff and flares the Apache carried. The sky lit up like the 4th of July. 3 seconds. This was it, the moment of truth. Alex pulled the cyclic full back and pushed the collective to maximum. The Apache stood on its tail, climbing vertically. The 4 incoming missiles, confused by the wall of countermeasures, tried to track the climbing helicopter. 1 second. "Brake!" Alex screamed, cutting power again. The Apache fell like a stone, dropping straight back down as 4 missiles converged on the point where she should have been. They met in a spectacular mid-air collision, the combined explosions creating a fireball that could be seen for miles. But it wasn't over. The 2 Stingers she'd fired straight up had reached their peak altitude and were now falling back to Earth, their infrared seekers searching for targets. 2 of the MiGs, diving to re-engage, flew right into their path. The first MiG pilot saw the missile too late. It impacted his right engine, tearing the aircraft in half. The second managed to evade, but the violent maneuver put him directly in the path of debris from his wingman. A chunk of burning engine was sucked into his intake. The turbine blades disintegrated, sending shrapnel through the aircraft's fuel tanks. "Eject! Eject! Eject!" 2 more parachutes blossomed against the darkening sky. 6 jets had come to kill her. 4 were down. The 2 surviving Su-27s climbed rapidly, putting distance between themselves and the Apache. They'd witnessed the impossible, a single helicopter destroying 2/3 of their squadron. The hunters had become the hunted. "Viper lead to base." One of the remaining pilots radioed, his voice shaking. Requesting immediate withdrawal. The American, it's not possible. She's not human. Negative Viper lead. Destroy that helicopter at all costs. Alex monitored their transmission, a cold fury building in her chest. Below, she could see the SEALs' position. The Hellfires had devastated the enemy ground forces, but more were coming. She was almost out of ammunition, maybe 300 rounds left in the chain gun, no missiles. 2 fresh Su-27s against a damaged, nearly defenseless Apache. Any sane pilot would run. Alexandra Riley wasn't sane. She was a Reaper. Boomer, how's our damage? Hydraulics are sluggish. We're leaking fuel, and I'm pretty sure I need new underwear. But she's still flying. Good enough? Hold on to something. She climbed again, this time slow and deliberate, making herself visible to the orbiting fighters. They'd expect her to hide in the canyon. Instead, she rose to meet them, the setting sun at her back. Ghost Lead, this is Reaper. I need a favor. Reaper, you just saved our asses. Name it. I need you to paint a target with your laser designator. Can you do that? We've got one functional PEQ-15. What are you thinking? I'm thinking these boys want to play at altitude. Problem is they forgot something important. What's that? Physics. The Su-27s rolled in for their attack run. At their altitude and speed, they had every advantage. Their missiles could reach her long before she could engage with her gun. They split up, approaching from opposite directions, a classic pincer maneuver. Now, Ghost Lead. The SEAL's laser designator painted the lead Su-27. It meant nothing to the fighters' defensive systems. Ground-based laser designators were for marking targets for smart bombs, not for helicopters. But Alex wasn't using it for targeting. She was using it for distraction. The pilot saw the laser hitting his canopy and instinctively jinked left, breaking his attack run for just a second. In that second, Alex did something that shouldn't have been possible. She flew the Apache sideways, actually sideways, using the rotor disc like a giant air brake while maintaining forward momentum. The physics were simple. An object in motion stays in motion. The Apache's weight, suddenly presented broadside to the airstream, created massive drag. She decelerated from 150 knots to almost 0 in 3 seconds. The Su-27, committed to its attack run, overshot massively. And for one perfect moment, a fighter jet traveling at 400 knots found itself directly in front of a hovering Apache's chain gun. Alex didn't waste the opportunity. She held the trigger down, emptying the remaining rounds into the flanker's belly. The armor-piercing explosive rounds found the fuel cells. The Su-27 didn't explode. It disintegrated, transformed into a cloud of burning confetti. The last pilot watched his wingman die and made a decision. Honor orders pride. None of it mattered anymore. He'd seen 5 of his squadron mates destroyed by a single helicopter. He turned north and ran afterburners glowing like twin stars as he fled into the gathering darkness. Viper 2 is withdrawing, he radioed. The American. She laughs at death. I will not die for nothing. Alex watched him go, her Apache, hovering above the battlefield, like an angel of death. Below, the surviving enemy ground forces were retreating, dragging their wounded. The sight of fighter jets falling from the sky had broken their will to fight. Reaper 1. This is Ghost Lead. LZ is clear. We're ready for extract. Copy that, Ghost. Your ride's 10 minutes out. And she checked her fuel gauge, running on fumes. Skywatch Reaper 1. I'm Winchester on ammo bingo fuel. RTB. Reaper 1. Confirm. Did you just... 5 fighter jets engaged. 5 fighter jets down. The 6th chose wisdom over valor. Silence on the frequency. Then, Reaper 1, be advised you have a lot of people who want to talk to you when you land. Roger that, Skywatch. They can get in line. The flight back to Forward Operating Base Chapman took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Alex's hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Beside her, Boomer had gone quiet, processing what they'd just survived. "Alex," he finally said, "what we just did. It's impossible." "No," she replied, thinking of her father, of every instructor who'd told her women couldn't fly combat aircraft, of every fighter pilot who'd looked down on helicopter crews. It was just impossible until today. The Apache's skids touched down on the tarmac just as the last of its fuel ran out. Through the canopy, Alex could see what looked like the entire base had turned out. Ground crew pilots, commanders, everyone standing in silent rows watching. She powered down the engines, the rotor blades slowly spinning to a stop. The Apache was riddled with bullet holes, hydraulic fluid, dripping panels missing. It looked like it had gone through hell and barely survived, which Alex reflected was exactly what had happened. She popped the canopy and climbed out, her legs unsteady. Boomer was already on the ground, kissing the tarmac. The crowd remained silent, staring. Then from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Within seconds, the entire flight line erupted in applause. Colonel Harrison, the base commander, pushed through the crowd. He was a former F-16 pilot, old school, the type who believed fighter pilots were the only real pilots. He stopped in front of Alex, his face unreadable. "Lieutenant Colonel Riley," he said formally, "you disobeyed a direct order to return to base." "Yes, sir." "You engaged enemy fighter aircraft with a helicopter." "Yes, sir." "You destroyed 5 modern fighter jets with an Apache." "Yes, sir." He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he saluted. "Outstanding work, Reaper. Outstanding work." The debrief took 4 hours. Every second of the engagement had been recorded by the Apache's onboard systems and the AWACS surveillance aircraft. Intelligence officers, weapons specialists, and tactical instructors pored over the data, trying to understand how it had happened. "This shouldn't be possible," Major Chen from Tactical Analysis kept saying. "The speed differential alone, the altitude advantages. It's like watching a rowboat sink a destroyer." Alex sat quietly sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She was thinking about her father again, about the lessons he'd taught her in their backyard in Texas. "Most people see what is," he'd said. "Warriors see what could be." "Lieutenant Colonel Riley." General Morrison, commander of all coalition air assets in Afghanistan, entered the room. Everyone jumped to attention. "At ease. I've just gotten off the phone with the Pentagon. What you did today? It's going to change everything." "Sir." "We've been thinking about air combat all wrong. Fixed-wing superiority, altitude dominance, speed advantages, that's been doctrine since World War I. You just proved that with the right pilot, the right tactics, and the right mindset, a helicopter can be the deadliest thing in the sky." He handed her a folder marked Top Secret. "Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to Fort Rucker. You're going to head a new program training helicopter pilots in anti-aircraft tactics. Codename Project Dark Horse." Alex opened the folder, scanning the contents. Unlimited budget, hand-picked instructors, access to the most advanced helicopters in the inventory. It was everything she'd dreamed of. "There's one more thing," Morrison added. "The Navy SEALs you saved, they've requested you for all future operations. Seems they trust you more than their own air support." From the back of the room, Boomer laughed. "They should. She just did the impossible." "No," Alex corrected, standing up. "I just did what my father always said to do. I turned weakness into strength. A helicopter is slower than a jet, less armed, less protected, but it can hover, it can hide, it can think in 3 dimensions while jets think in 2. Every disadvantage is just an advantage waiting to be discovered." She looked around the room at the assembled officers, some still skeptical, others beginning to understand. For 70 years we've accepted that fighters rule the sky. Today proved that's only true if we let them. The age of helicopter supremacy has just begun. Later that night, Alex stood alone on the flight line looking at her damaged Apache. Ground crew swarmed over it, patching holes, replacing parts. They'd already painted 5 fighter silhouettes on the fuselage, her kills from today. Her satellite phone rang. She knew who it would be before she answered. "Mom, Alexandra." Her mother's voice was tight with emotion. "I saw the news. They're saying you shot down 5 jets." "Yeah. Your father would have been so proud." Alex felt tears sting her eyes. Colonel James Riley had died in a helicopter crash 5 years ago, flying rescue missions after Hurricane Katrina. He'd saved 43 people before his Black Hawk went down. "He always said I'd change the world, Mom." He was right. He usually was. A pause. "That laugh, though, they played it on CNN. The enemy pilot's recording. You sounded just like him." "The Riley laugh. The Riley laugh. Your enemies hear it. They know they're already dead." After the call, Alex climbed back into the Apache's cockpit. She ran her hands over the controls, feeling the machine's spirit. Tomorrow she'd fly back to the States. Tomorrow she'd start building the future of aerial warfare. But tonight, she sat in the cockpit where she'd made history, and she remembered her father's last words to her. "The sky isn't the limit, Alex. The sky is home." In the distance, she could hear helicopters approaching Black Hawks coming to extract the SEALs she'd saved. They flew low and fast, the sound of their rotors like war drums in the night. Once that sound had meant rescue support evacuation. After today, it would mean something more. It would mean death from below predators in the valley's hunters who laughed at the gods of speed and altitude. The fighter pilots of the world would learn to check their six, to fear the canyons, to respect the helicopter. The age of the Reaper had begun. As she climbed down from the Apache, her crew chief ran up with a tablet. "Ma'am, you need to see this. Social media is exploding. @Reaper Riley is trending worldwide. Fighter pilots from 12 countries are saying what you did was impossible." Alex smiled that same cold smile she'd worn in combat. "Good. Let them think it's impossible. Makes it easier next time." "Next time? Chief, today I was 1 Apache against 6 jets. Imagine what happens when I train a squadron. Imagine 50 Apaches working together, hunting in packs." Her eyes gleamed with dangerous possibilities. The age of air superiority fighters is over. They just don't know it yet. She walked back toward the operations center, where she knew a secure video conference with the Joint Chiefs was waiting. They wanted to understand what had happened. They wanted to know if it could be replicated. She'd tell them yes. She'd tell them that everything they thought they knew about air combat was obsolete. She'd tell them that the future belonged to those who could adapt, who could think in 3 dimensions, who could turn weakness into strength. But first, she had one more call to make. "Ghost Lead, this is Reaper." "Reaper. We're aboard the extract birds. Just wanted to say, what you did. There aren't words. There's one word, Ghost Lead." "What's that? Beginning?" She hung up and looked at the stars beginning to appear in the Afghan sky. Somewhere up there, satellites were recording, analysts were studying, and doctrine writers were scrambling to understand what had happened today. Let them scramble. By the time they figured it out, she'd have already moved on to the next impossible thing. The Apache sat silent on the tarmac behind her, scarred but unbroken. Tomorrow, ground crew would finish the repairs. Tomorrow it would fly again. And tomorrow the world would wake up to a new reality. One where the hunters could become the hunted, where altitude meant vulnerability, where speed meant predictability. Tomorrow, the world would wake up to the age of the Reaper. But tonight, Alexandra Riley stood on a flight line in Afghanistan, listening to the sound of helicopters in the distance, and she laughed. It was the same laugh that had frozen the blood of 5 fighter pilots, the same laugh that had echoed across the combat frequency, the same laugh that would soon be played in every military academy in the world as they tried to understand how one woman in a helicopter had changed everything. The Riley laugh, the sound of impossible becoming inevitable. The C-17's cargo hold vibrated with a familiar rhythm as Alexandra Riley stared at the folder in her hands. 3 weeks had passed since Afghanistan, since the impossible had become reality. 3 weeks of interviews, analysis, and politicians wanting photo ops with the woman who'd changed aerial warfare. Now she was heading home to Fort Rucker, but the folder Morrison had given her contained something that made her blood run cold. "You're not going to believe this," Boomer said, dropping into the seat beside her. He'd refused reassignment, insisting that if she was going to train killers, she'd need someone who'd been there when it happened. "Just got word from intelligence. Those pilots you shot down, they weren't regular Afghan Air Force." Alex looked up sharply. "What do you mean? Russian mercenaries, Wagner Group. And here's the kicker, their squadron commander wants to meet you." The folder suddenly felt heavier. She opened it again this time, noticing the addendum she'd missed before. Colonel Viktor Volk Petrov, former Russian Air Force, now Wagner's top ace, with 43 confirmed kills. He'd lost 5 of his best pilots to her Apache, and now he wanted a face-to-face meeting. "It's a trap," Alex said immediately. "Maybe. Or maybe he wants to understand how you did it. Either way, Morrison wants you to go. Neutral ground Dubai. Full diplomatic protection." The transport hit turbulence, shaking violently. In that moment of instability, Alex made her decision. You didn't learn by playing it safe. You learned by dancing with devils. When, tomorrow night, you land at Rucker at Aero 800, brief the new training cadre at 1400, and fly out to Dubai at 2000. Jesus, they're not wasting time. The world's not waiting, Alex. Every military on Earth is trying to figure out how to copy what you did. The Chinese are already running simulations. The Israelis want to buy your training program. And the Russians? He paused. The Russians want to know if it was luck or skill. The landing at Fort Rucker felt surreal. The same base where she'd been told women couldn't handle combat helicopters now had a banner reading, "Welcome home, Reaper." The irony wasn't lost on her. As she stepped off the transport, she saw them 12 helicopters in formation pilots standing at attention. Her new students. 10 Hut. The formation leader, a chief warrant officer with more gray than black in his hair, snapped a salute. "Ma'am, CW4 Marcus Webb, we're your dark horse candidates." She walked the line, studying each face. 8 men, 4 women. All experienced pilots with combat tours. All skeptics, she could see it in their eyes. They'd volunteered not because they believed, but because they wanted to prove her Afghanistan fight was a fluke. Perfect. "At ease," she said, then smiled that dangerous smile. "You all think I'm full of shit?" The formation shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. "Good. Skeptics make the best students because they test everything. Tomorrow we'll start with the basics. Today." She gestured to the helicopters. "Today you're going to try to kill me." Webb's eyes widened. "Ma'am, 12 versus 1. You in your helicopters, me in mine. Simulation rounds only, but full combat rules. If you can shoot me down in 30 minutes, you all get a week's leave. If you can't..." She let the pause hang. "You accept that everything you know about aerial combat is wrong." The challenge electrified them. She could see the competitive fire igniting, the disbelief turning to determination. Within minutes, they were scrambling to their aircraft, a mix of Apaches, Cobras, and even 2 little birds. Alex climbed into a stock Apache. No modifications. No advantages. Boomer was already in the gunner's seat, grinning like a madman. "You sure about this? They need to understand, Boomer. It's not about the machine. It's about the mind." The exercise area was 20 square miles of Alabama wilderness. As soon as they lifted off, Alex could see her students spreading out trying to box her in. They were thinking two-dimensionally classic mistake. "Dark Horse Flight, this is Reaper. Weapons hot in 30 seconds. She dove immediately, not waiting for the countdown to finish. The Apache plunged toward the tree line as her students scrambled to react. Webb's voice crackled over the radio. "She's running southern quadrant, all units converge." But Alex wasn't running. She was hunting. Using the trees as cover, she popped up behind a cobra that had been too eager to pursue. The simulation system registered a perfect lock. "Kill" appeared on the cobra's display. 1 down. "Johnson's out. Jesus Christ, she..." Alex was already moving, sliding sideways through a gap in the trees that looked too narrow for a helicopter. A little bird tried to follow and clipped a tree in the simulation, spinning out. 2 down. "Maintain altitude advantage," Webb shouted. "Don't follow her down." Smart, but not smart enough. Alex suddenly climbed vertically, bursting through the canopy like a breaching whale. 3 Apaches were hovering above, waiting. They fired simultaneously. She killed the engines. The Apache dropped like a stone, the simulation rounds passing overhead. As she fell, she fired her own weapons, the computer registering hits on 2 of the 3 attackers. The third tried to dive after her, but Alex restarted the engines and pirouetted the Apache in mid-air, bringing her nose to bear. Another kill registered. 5 down in 3 minutes. "This is impossible," someone shouted. "The impossible is just an excuse," Alex replied calmly, then laughed that same cold laugh from Afghanistan. Several pilots actually flinched at the sound. The remaining 7 regrouped, trying a coordinated attack. They came from multiple angles, high and low, forcing her to choose. But Alex had learned long ago that when faced with impossible choices, you create a third option. She flew straight up, then backward, literally flying the Apache in reverse, something the manual said would cause immediate loss of control. The simulation computers actually glitched, unable to process the maneuver. In that moment of confusion, she destroyed 3 more attackers, whose targeting systems couldn't lock onto something that wasn't supposed to exist. 8 down, 4 remaining. 22 minutes left. Webb and his 3 surviving pilots had learned. They stayed, spread, and waited. They were forcing her to come to them, burning her fuel, testing her patience. "Smart play, Webb," she transmitted. "But you forgot something." "What's that, ma'am? I don't have to kill all of you. I just have to survive." She landed the Apache in a clearing and powered down everything except minimal systems. On their displays, she virtually disappeared. The 4 hunters suddenly realized they'd become the hunted somewhere below. Hidden, a Reaper waited. "Find her," Webb ordered. "Thermal scans everything." They descended carefully, searching. The first pilot to spot the powered-down Apache Dove, to engage certain of victory. The moment he committed to the attack run, Alex powered up and launched vertically, passing him head-on. The simulation registered mutual destruction, both aircraft destroyed. But Alex had planned for it. She'd chosen her position carefully. The debris from her simulated destruction would have fallen directly onto another searching helicopter below. The computer registered a second kill from the cascade failure. 2 left. Webb and 1 other. 10 minutes remaining. "Ma'am," Webb's voice held newfound respect. That was... How did you even think of that? My father taught me chess when I was 5. Alex replied, now flying aggressive patterns hunting them. He said the best players don't just think about moves, they think about the consequences of consequences. She found Webb's wingman, first catching him silhouetted against the sun. The kill was almost anticlimactic, a simple ambush from his blind spot. But Webb had used his wingman's destruction as bait. He came screaming in from Alex's 6 o'clock perfect positioning. Got you, Reaper! His weapons locked. He fired. And in that moment, Alex did something that shouldn't have been possible with an Apache's weight distribution. She flipped the helicopter completely upside down, flying inverted for 3 seconds, while the simulation rounds passed beneath her. Before Webb could process what had happened, she'd rolled upright and put rounds into his rotor disc. The simulation ended. 12 aircraft down. The Reaper victorious. When they landed, her students gathered around her Apache in stunned silence. Webb was the first to speak. Ma'am, I've been flying for 18 years. What you just did, it violates everything I know about physics. No, Alex corrected, climbing down. It violates everything you've been told about physics. The Apache can do things the manual says are impossible. The question is whether the pilot is willing to try them. She looked at each of them in turn. Tomorrow you start learning how to think like predators, not prey. For now, get some rest. You're going to need it. As they dispersed, still shaking their heads in disbelief, Boomer caught her arm. That inverted flight thing, we've never actually tried that for real. What if the computer hadn't bought it? Then they'd have learned a different lesson that even Reapers can die. She checked her watch. Come on. I've got a plane to catch and a Russian mercenary to meet. The flight to Dubai took 16 hours with refueling stops. Alex spent it reviewing Petrov's file. 62-years-old veteran of Chechnya, Syria, and a dozen other conflicts. He'd survived the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of the oligarchs, and the birth of Wagner Group. His men called him Volk the Wolf because he hunted in packs and never missed a kill. Until her. The meeting was set for the Burj Al Arab's helipad neutral ground, 1,000 feet above the city. As her helicopter approached, Alex saw him standing alone, hands clasped behind his back, gray hair whipping in the wind. He was smaller than she'd expected, compact with the economy of movement that marked a professional killer. Colonel Riley, he said in accented English as she approached. The woman who made me question everything I know about war. Colonel Petrov, the man whose pilots weren't good enough. He smiled at Predator, recognizing another predator. Direct, good. We don't have time for diplomatic dancing. He pulled out a tablet showing her footage. She recognized her fight from Afghanistan, but from angles she'd never seen. My pilot's gun cameras. I've watched this 1,000 times. I understand what you did. What I don't understand is why it worked. Because your pilots believed they couldn't lose. And you believed you couldn't lose. What's the difference? Alex moved to the helipad's edge, looking down at the city lights below. I believed I couldn't afford to lose. There's a difference between confidence and desperation. Your pilots were confident. I was desperate. Desperation makes you creative. Is that what you're teaching your students, desperation? I'm teaching them that every rule is negotiable except physics, and even physics can be bent if you're willing to pay the price. Petrov joined her at the edge. My government wants to kill you. You've embarrassed us, shown the world that our pilots can be beaten by a single American woman. Alex tensed, calculating distances, escape routes. But I, Petrov continued, want to hire you. The words hung in the air like unexploded ordnance. Alex turned to face him, seeing something unexpected in his eyes, respect. Wagner Group needs to evolve or die. The age of traditional air superiority is ending, as you proved. I want you to train my pilots. 1 month your techniques, your tactics. I'll pay you $10 million. You want me to train the people who might one day fight Americans? I want you to train warriors who understand that war itself is evolving. Today's enemy is tomorrow's ally. Yesterday's impossibility is today's doctrine. He paused. Your father would understand. James Riley trained North Vietnamese pilots after the war. Did you know that Alex's blood went cold? That's classified. Many things are classified. Few things are secret. Petrov smiled again. He spent 3 months in Hanoi in 1995, teaching former enemies how to think like Americans. One of those pilots later saved an American ship from pirates in the South China Sea. Your father understood that knowledge belongs to no nation. And if I refuse, then you fly home, train your students, and we remain adversaries. But consider this. Wouldn't you rather know how we think? Wouldn't you rather understand your enemy's mind from the inside? A helicopter approached from the east, its lights blinking in sequence. Petrov checked his watch. That's my extraction. You have 48 hours to decide. My pilots are in Kazakhstan waiting. If you come, you'll have full immunity, complete protection, and my personal guarantee of safety. The word of a mercenary, the word of a warrior who recognizes another warrior. He moved toward the approaching helicopter, then stopped. Your laugh during the battle. My pilots still wake up hearing it. One of them has quit flying entirely. Psychological warfare is still warfare. Indeed. Which is why I need you to teach us to laugh at death, too. The helicopter touched down, and Petrov climbed aboard without looking back. As it lifted off, he threw something from the window, a flash drive that landed at Alex's feet. She picked it up, knowing she shouldn't, knowing curiosity would override caution. Back in her hotel room, she plugged the drive into a secure laptop. It contained footage from dozens of aerial engagements Wagner pilots fighting in Syria, Ukraine, Africa. But more importantly, it contained their failures. Every time they'd been shot down, every mistake, every weakness. Petrov was showing her his throat, trusting her not to cut it. Her secure phone rang. Morrison's voice was tight. Riley, what the hell did Petrov want? To learn, sir. And, I'm considering it. Silence. Then, the CIA will have a stroke. The CIA doesn't understand what's happening, sir. This isn't about nations anymore. It's about evolution. The next war won't be America versus Russia or China. It'll be those who adapt versus those who don't. You're talking about training our enemies. I'm talking about ensuring we understand how our enemies think when they're desperate enough to learn from us. Morrison sighed. I can't officially approve this. I'm not asking for official approval. If you go, you're on your own. No extraction, no backup. Understood. Alex, your father would be proud and terrified. The best kind of legacy, sir. She hung up and stared at the flash drive. In 48 hours, she could be in Kazakhstan teaching Russian mercenaries how to think like her, or she could play it safe, stay home, train only Americans. But playing it safe had never been the Riley way. She picked up her phone and dialed a number Petrov had included on the drive. Colonel, his voice held no surprise. One condition. Name it. My weapons officer comes with me. Full immunity for both of us. Done. And Petrov, if this is a trap, if this was a trap, Colonel Riley, you'd already be dead. I don't need elaborate schemes. What I need is evolution, and you're the catalyst. She hung up and found Boomer at the hotel bar halfway through a whiskey. Pack your bags, she said. We're going to Kazakhstan. He didn't even hesitate. To train Russians? You've lost your mind. Maybe. But think about it, what better way to test our tactics than against pilots who know them? What better way to get killed, you mean? Boomer, the world is changing. The rules of air combat I proved obsolete in Afghanistan. They're just the beginning. Ground warfare, naval engagement, even cyber, everything is about to shift. We can either ride the wave or get crushed by it. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. I'll need more whiskey. The flight to Kazakhstan took them through Istanbul and Baku, each stop adding another layer of watchers, CIA, FSB, Mossad. Everyone wanted to know what the Reaper was doing. At the final approach to the Wagner training facility, their pilot spoke for the first time. Colonel Riley, we have a problem. Through the cockpit window, she could see what he meant. The airfield was surrounded by helicopters, at least 30, all armed, all with rotors spinning. Petrov, she called on the radio. A welcoming committee, Colonel. My pilots insisted. They want to see the woman who killed their comrades. It was a test, Alex realized. Land and face them or run. She laughed that same cold laugh broadcasting on all frequencies. Tell your pilots to form up. First lesson starts now. She took the controls from the surprised pilot diving toward the airfield at an angle that would scatter the waiting helicopters. They broke formation, unsure whether she was attacking or landing. In that confusion, she threaded between them, using their rotor wash to destabilize those who got too close. 2 helicopters actually collided trying to avoid her, their rotors tangling. She landed in the center of the field surrounded by angry, humiliated pilots. Perfect. Stepping out, she faced a wall of hostile faces. These were killers' mercenaries who'd fought in every hellhole on Earth. They wanted blood, hers. You came here to learn, she said in Russian, surprising them. First lesson, anger makes you stupid. I just took out 2 of your aircraft without firing a shot. Why? Because you were emotional. You wanted revenge. In the air, emotion is death. A pilot stepped forward, scarred face twisted with rage. You killed my friends. Your friends killed themselves the moment they underestimated an enemy, just like you're doing now. He moved toward her, fists clenched. Alex didn't retreat. Instead, she pulled her sidearm and offered it to him, grip first. Take it. Shoot me. Prove that Wagner Group values revenge over evolution. The moment stretched taut. Petrov watched from the control tower, letting it play out. The scarred pilot took the weapon chambered around, aimed it at her head. Alex smiled. Pull the trigger, and you'll never know how I did it. You'll never know how to stop the next pilot who thinks like me, and there will be more. I'm not unique. I'm just first. The pilot's hand shook. Around him, his comrades waited. Finally, he lowered the weapon. Show us, he said simply. Your name? Dmitri. I flew the 2nd Su-27. The one who ran. His jaw clenched. Yes. Smart. You recognized a losing battle. That's not cowardice, it's intelligence. You'll be my first student. She turned to address all of them. For the next month, I'm going to destroy everything you think you know about aerial combat. You'll hate me. You'll want to quit. Some of you might try to kill me again. But those who survive will be the deadliest helicopter pilots on Earth, because you'll know the secret. What secret? Dmitri asked. That in the air there are no rules except those physics enforces. Everything else, altitude advantages, speed superiority, weapon ranges, they're just suggestions. And suggestions can be ignored if you're willing to pay the price. She could see the shift in their eyes, hatred mixing with curiosity, anger yielding to hunger. These were warriors, and she was offering them something more valuable than revenge evolution. Tomorrow, 0400 hours. We start with forgetting. Before you can learn to fly like me, you need to forget how to fly like you. She started walking toward the quarters Petrov had arranged. Oh, and gentlemen, tonight, get drunk. Tomorrow you'll need steady hands and clear minds. Tonight is the last night you'll sleep peacefully. As she walked away, She heard them murmuring in Russian, discussing, arguing. Good. Doubt was the first step toward growth. In her quarters, Boomer was already setting up their equipment, encrypted communications, surveillance, countermeasures, escape routes planned. Think they'll try to kill us tonight? He asked. No. They're curious now. Curiosity is stronger than hatred. And Petrov, he's the most dangerous one here, not because he wants us dead, but because he wants to understand us completely. He's not just learning tactics, he's learning how we think. And we're teaching him. We're teaching them what we can afford for them to know. Meanwhile, we're learning everything about them. Her secure phone buzzed. A message from Morrison. Asset confirms Wagner pilots from 6 other locations converging on your position. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Alex smiled grimly. Working was relative. She'd just walked into the wolf's den wearing meat for armor. But sometimes to change the world, you had to be willing to bet everything on impossible odds. She'd already done it once in Afghanistan. Now she was doing it again in Kazakhstan, but this time the stakes were higher. She wasn't just fighting for 6 SEALs. She was fighting for the future of aerial warfare itself. Tomorrow she'd start teaching wolves to hunt like reapers. But tonight she stood at her window, watching helicopters patrol the perimeter, and wondered if her father would approve. Then she laughed, cold and sharp, and knew he would. The Riley family had always understood that the greatest victories came from the greatest risks. And this risk, this insane gambit of training her enemies, this would change everything. The alarm screamed at 3:30 hours, but Alex was already awake, standing at her window, watching Dmitri's helicopter circle the perimeter for the 3rd time. He'd been flying patterns all night, she realized, trying to understand how she thought. Smart. She dressed quickly in her flight suit, noting the fresh scratches on her door lock. Someone had tried to enter during the night, but hadn't succeeded. Boomer's countermeasures had held. They tested the windows too, Boomer said from his cot, not opening his eyes. Thermal imaging at 0200, sonic scanning at 0315. These boys don't trust easy. Good. Trust would mean they're not taking this seriously. She walked out into the Kazakhstan cold, her breath forming clouds in the darkness. The entire Wagner contingent was already assembled, 42 pilots, now more than Petrov had promised. Word had spread. They stood in perfect formation, but she could feel their hostility like heat from a forge. You're early, she said in Russian. Eager to die. A few shifted uncomfortably. Dmitri stepped forward. You said 0400. I lied. First lesson in combat, even time is a weapon. The Americans you'll face won't announce their attacks. Neither should you. She walked through their ranks, studying faces. You've been trained to think in formations, patterns, schedules. That ends now. From this moment, you're not soldiers. You're predators. And predators don't keep schedules. She stopped in front of a younger pilot, barely 25. You? What's your name? Mikhail. Mikhail, why do you fly? To serve Russia. And she slapped him hard across the face. The formation tensed, hands moving to weapons. Wrong. Try again. His eyes blazed with fury. To kill. Better. But still wrong. She turned to address them all. You fly because you're already dead. The moment you accepted this life, you died. Everything since is borrowed time. Once you accept that, truly accept it, you become invincible, because how can you kill someone who's already dead? Petrov emerged from the command building, coffee in hand, watching with interest. Alex had counted on his appearance. Colonel Petrov, she called out, would you join us? He walked over, suspicious but curious. When he was close enough, Alex moved. Her hand shot out, grabbing his sidearm from its holster. Before anyone could react, she pressed it against her own temple. Colonel Riley, shoot me, she said to Petrov, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Order it! Prove to your men that you value control over evolution." As the formation had gone deadly still, Petrov's eyes narrowed, calculating. "You're insane." "No, I'm teaching." She looked at the pilots. "Every time you take off, you should be ready to die. Not willing ready. There's a difference. Willing means you'll sacrifice yourself if needed. Ready means you've already accepted it's going to happen, so you might as well take as many enemies with you as possible." She pulled the trigger. The click of the empty chamber echoed across the tarmac. Several pilots actually stepped back. Petrov hadn't even flinched. "You removed the bullets," he said. "No." She ejected the magazine, showing him the rounds. "I removed the firing pin last night when I broke into your office." Now Petrov did react, his hand moving to his pocket where he kept his office keys. Alex tossed him the firing pin. "How? Your security thinks in 2 dimensions, doors and windows. I came through the ventilation system." She addressed the pilots again. "In Afghanistan, I defeated jets because they thought in straight lines, up, down, forward, back. You've been trained the same way. Today that changes." She walked to the nearest helicopter, an Mi-28 Night Hunter. "Mikhail, Dmitri, 2 others. Get in." They climbed aboard, uncertain. Alex took the pilot's seat, running through rapid pre-flight checks. "We're going to play a game. You 4 against me. If you can stay conscious for 10 minutes, you win." "Conscious?" Dmitri asked from behind her. Alex lifted off without answering immediately, throwing the helicopter into a violent corkscrew climb. The G-forces slammed them into their seats. At 3,000 feet, she suddenly reversed, flying backward while spinning. Mikhail vomited. She laughed that cold Riley laugh and pushed the helicopter into a maneuver that shouldn't have been possible, a complete barrel roll at -G. The aircraft's warning systems screamed. The engine coughed again. In the back, one pilot had already passed out. Dmitri was fighting to stay conscious, his face purple from the blood forced into his head. "This is impossible," Mikhail gasped. "That word again." Alex leveled out for exactly 2 seconds, letting them think it was over, then dove straight down, pulling up at the last possible second. The landing skids actually touched the ground before she yanked them skyward again. The second pilot lost consciousness. 7 minutes, she announced, then flew the helicopter sideways, completely sideways, like a car drifting through a turn. The aerodynamics were all wrong, the engine straining, but she held it counting. 8 minutes. Dmitri's eyes were rolling back. Mikhail had his head between his knees. She could hear Petrov on the radio demanding to know what was happening, but she ignored him. 9 minutes. She suddenly cut the engines entirely. The helicopter dropped like a stone. Both remaining passengers screamed. At 50 feet, she restarted everything and landed soft as a feather. 10 minutes. You lose. She climbed out, leaving 4 semi-conscious Russians in the helicopter. The assembled pilots stared in shock. Several were recording on their phones. "That's lesson 2, she announced. "Your body is your enemy. It wants comfort, stability, normalcy. In my Apache fighting those jets, I pulled 9 Gs repeatedly. I should have been unconscious. But rage, desperation, and acceptance of death can override physiology. Tomorrow we start G-force training. You'll learn to stay conscious through anything because unconscious pilots are dead pilots." Petrov approached his face, unreadable. "You could have killed them." "Yes." "You could have crashed." "Yes." "This is insanity." "No, Colonel. This is war. Your pilots have been playing soldier. I'm teaching them to be weapons." She looked at the 4 men stumbling out of the helicopter. "Dmitri?" He looked up, still green. "You lasted longest. You're my squadron leader. Pick 11 pilots. Tomorrow you 12 will learn the impossible." "Why 12? Because that's how many helicopters I faced in Alabama. If 12 American pilots couldn't kill me, 12 Russian pilots trained by me should be unstoppable. She started walking back to her quarters, then stopped. Oh, and gentlemen, tonight sleep in your helicopters. From now on, they're not machines. They're extensions of your body. You need to know every rivet, every wire, every vibration. When something goes wrong, and it will, you'll have 2 seconds to fix it or die. Start learning now. In the command building, Petrov had assembled his senior staff. They watched her on the monitors as she supervised the pilots' first attempts at sleeping in their aircraft. "She's insane," Major Volkov said. "This will get people killed." "Perhaps," Petrov replied. "But look at them. When have you seen our pilots this engaged? She's doing something we failed to do, making them believe in the impossible. By breaking every rule of aviation safety. By proving those rules are guidelines, not laws." Petrov pulled up the footage from Afghanistan again. 5 jets, Volkov. 5 of our best pilots destroyed by 1 woman in a helicopter. Either she's magic or she knows something we don't. I'm betting on the latter. On the screen, Alex was showing Dmitri something in the Mi-28's engine compartment. They couldn't hear the words, but they could see his expression change from skepticism to amazement. "What's she showing him?" Volkov asked. "How to think," Petrov said. "And that terrifies me more than any weapon." The next morning started with Alex dragging a pilot from his helicopter at 0200. He'd fallen asleep in the cockpit, exactly what she'd wanted. She poured ice water on his face. "You're dead," she announced to the others who'd scrambled out to watch. "Fell asleep on guard duty. In combat, you'd have woken up in pieces." She turned to Dmitri. "Your first leadership test. This man failed. What's his punishment?" Dmitri hesitated. These were his comrades, men he'd flown with for years. "Every second you hesitate, enemies are targeting you," Alex said coldly. "He flies rear guard for a week," Dmitri decided. "Last to eat, last to fuel, first to engage any threat." Soft, but acceptable. Next time someone fails, the punishment doubles. She led them to a makeshift classroom where she'd set up multiple screens. "Today you learn to see differently." She played footage from Afghanistan, but slowed down to 1/10 speed. "Watch my rotor blades. See how they flex. That's not normal. I'm over-torquing them, pushing past redline. The manual says this will cause catastrophic failure in 30 seconds. "But it didn't," Mikhail observed. "Because I only did it for 29 seconds. The manual builds in safety margins. I use those margins as weapons." She switched footage. "Here, fighting the MiG. Watch the exhaust temperature. I'm running 20 degrees above maximum. The engine should have seized." "Why didn't it?" "Because I was simultaneously dumping fuel into the combustion chamber, cooling and accelerating at the same time. It's insane it destroys the engine, but for 15 seconds I had 30% more power." A pilot raised his hand. "You're teaching us to destroy our own aircraft." "I'm teaching you that a destroyed aircraft that completes its mission is worth more than a pristine one that fails. In Afghanistan, my Apache was so damaged it never flew again. But 6 Americans lived. That's the only math that matters." She pulled out a tablet showing technical diagrams. "Every helicopter has hidden capabilities the manufacturers don't advertise because they're afraid of lawsuits. The Mi-28 can actually fly inverted for 12 seconds. I've tested it. The Ka-52 can survive a complete tail rotor failure if you know how to use the main rotor torque. These aren't in any manual." "How do you know this?" Dmitri asked. "Because I've crashed 17 helicopters in simulators finding the limits, and 3 in real life." She pulled up her flight records. 2 during training, 1 in Iraq, when I proved an Apache could survive a direct RPG hit to the engine compartment. "You crashed on purpose." "I flew into an RPG to prove a point. The crash was incidental." Even Petrov, watching from the back, looked stunned. She continued for 3 hours, showing them maneuvers that violated every principle of helicopter flight. Then she led them outside, where ground crews had prepared 12 helicopters, a mix of Mi-28s, Ka-52s, and Mi-35s. Dmitri, divide your pilots into pairs. One flies, one observes. We're going to practice dying. Practice dying. Every helicopter fails differently. You need to know what yours feels like when it's about to kill you. We'll start simple engine failures at altitude. The next 4 hours were controlled chaos. Alex personally demonstrated each failure mode, showing them how to recognize the subtle vibrations that preceded catastrophic failure, the smell of burning hydraulics, the specific sound an engine made 2 seconds before it seized. 3 pilots quit after the first hour, unable to handle the stress. She let them go without comment, natural selection at work. By noon, the remaining 9 plus Dmitri were exhausted, but exhilarated. They'd survived things that should have killed them, pushed machines past their breaking points, and lived. Tomorrow, Alex announced, we add weapons. You'll learn to shoot while inverted aim, while in a flat spin, and engage targets while your helicopter is actively on fire. On fire, Mikhail asked weakly. Fire is just rapid oxidation. If you're moving fast enough, the wind can actually blow it out. I've done it twice. That evening, Petrov invited her to dinner, a formal affair with his senior staff. Alex knew it was an interrogation disguised as hospitality, but she went anyway, wearing her dress uniform, medals gleaming. The Riley family motto was etched inside her collar, where no one could see it. Fortune favors the bold. Colonel Riley, Petrov began once the vodka was flowing. My pilots report you're teaching them to destroy their own aircraft. I'm teaching them that aircraft are expendable. Missions aren't. That's an expensive philosophy. Less expensive than failure. How much did those 5 jets I destroyed cost? How much did the pilot's training cost? How much did the embarrassment cost? General Kozlov, Wagner's operations commander, leaned forward. You speak as if you've already won a war that hasn't started. The war started the moment I shot down those jets. Everything since has been adaptation or extinction. Your choice. You're very confident for someone surrounded by enemies, Kozlov observed. Alex smiled and pulled out her phone, showing them a video. It was from that morning she'd rigged cameras in the helicopters without telling anyone. The footage showed Dmitri practicing one of her maneuvers alone after hours pushing himself to master it. Dmitri isn't my enemy anymore. He's my student. By extension, my weapon. She looked around the table. In 3 days, I've transformed 10 of your pilots from conventional thinkers to evolutionary warriors. Imagine what I can do with 3 weeks. And then you return to America and use this knowledge against us, Kozlov said. Yes, and you use it against Americans. That's the beauty of evolution, it doesn't choose sides. She stood raising her vodka glass. A toast to the future of warfare. May it be so terrifying that no one dares start it. Lest they drank. But she could see the calculation in their eyes. They were wondering if they'd made a mistake bringing her here, if they were creating their own doom. Good. Doubt meant they were starting to understand. That night she found Dmitri in his helicopter practicing the inverted flight maneuver. His nose was bleeding from the G-forces, but he didn't stop. You'll kill yourself, she said. Then I'll die learning. He landed, wiping the blood away. Why are you really here? The money revenge for something. My father died thinking helicopter pilots were support troops. Secondary. Expendable. She climbed into the co-pilot seat. I'm here to prove he was wrong. Every pilot I train, Russian or American, carries that proof forward. And if we meet in combat, then we'll create the most beautiful destruction the world has ever seen. He laughed. Not quite the Riley laugh, but getting there. You really are insane. Sanity is a luxury warriors can't afford. And she pointed to the controls. Show me the inverted flight again. This time I'll teach you how to fire weapons while upside down. They flew until dawn, pushing the machine past its limits, past sanity, past everything the manual said was possible. By the time they landed, Dmitri could shoot targets while flying backward and inverted. "I understand now," he said as they shut down the engines. "It's not about the helicopter. It's about refusing to accept limitations." "Close. It's about weaponizing limitations. Every weakness is just an untested strength." A messenger ran up. "Colonel Riley, Colonel Petrov requires your immediate presence." In the command center, Petrov was standing before a wall of screens showing satellite footage. Alex recognized the terrain immediately: Syria. "We have a situation," Petrov said. 40 Wagner personnel are trapped in Palmyra. ISIS has them surrounded and they have American-made Stinger missiles. We've already lost 2 helicopters trying to extract them. And you want my help? I want you to prove your methods work in actual combat. Take Dmitri and 3 others. If you can extract our people, I'll double your fee and share all our combat data from the last 5 years. Alex studied the tactical display. It was a death trap urban environment, multiple SAM sites, no cover. Perfect. "I'll need all 12 pilots," she said. "This is their final exam. You've only been training them for 3 days. Then they'd better have learned fast." She turned to Dmitri, who'd followed her in. "Get everyone airborne in 20 minutes. Full combat load." "We're not ready." She grabbed his flight suit, pulling him close. "You're already dead, remember. This is just choosing how you die. Make it memorable." As Dmitri ran to gather the others, Petrov stepped closer. "If you get my people killed..." "They're already killed, Colonel. I'm just giving them a chance to take enemies with them." She headed for the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Petrov, you might want to alert whoever's watching this base that 12 helicopters are about to do something impossible." Again. The flight to Syria took 3 hours. Alex flew lead with Dmitri on her wing and the others in 2 formations of 5. She'd spent the transit teaching them via radio, describing the urban combat tactics she'd developed in Iraq. Cities are vertical canyons. Use them like terrain. Every building is potential cover or potential threat. Trust nothing, assume everything wants to kill you, and remember, in urban combat, slow is dead. They reached the outskirts of Palmyra as the sun peaked. Through her sensors, Alex could see the situation was worse than briefed. The Wagner troops were pinned in an old hotel, taking fire from 3 sides. At least 6 SAM sites were visible, and she counted 40-plus ISIS fighters in fortified positions. "Reaper flight, this is Reaper 1. Here's how we play this." She outlined a plan that made several pilots audibly gasp. It involved flying between buildings at street level, using rotor wash to create dust storms, and deliberately triggering SAM sites to exhaust their ammunition. "This is suicide," Mikhail said. "Everything is suicide. This is just suicide with style." She rolled her helicopter toward the city. "Follow me and live. Hesitate and die. Your choice." She dove toward the streets, the others following. At 50 feet, she fired rockets into empty buildings, creating massive dust clouds. The other helicopters did the same. Within seconds, visibility dropped to near zero. "SAM launches detected," someone shouted. "Perfect. Dmitri, execute Cobra 2. They'd practiced this, using buildings as shields, popping up just long enough to draw fire, then dropping before missiles could track. It worked. 3 Stingers slammed into buildings, detonating harmlessly. But the 4th found a target. One of the Mi-35s took a hit to its tail rotor, spinning wildly. I'm hit. "Andre, listen to me," Alex said calmly. "Cut engines, deploy landing gear, use the main rotor torque to control your spin. You can land this." The manual says, "Fuck the manual. Trust me." She watched him fight the dying helicopter using techniques she'd taught him just days before. He crashed hard, but survived the helicopter, sliding to a stop against a building. "Mikhail, Victor, cover Andre. Everyone else, we're going loud." She climbed, suddenly breaking through the dust cloud. Every ISIS fighter saw her and opened fire. Bullets sparked off her armor as she deliberately made herself a target. Light them up. 11 helicopters rose from the dust like demons' chain guns blazing. The ISIS positions evaporated under the concentrated fire. But more fighters were arriving, and they had more missiles. "Reaper 1, this is Badger 6, the trapped Wagner commander radioed. "We have wounded. Can't move fast." "Copy, Badger. Dmitri, take 5 and clear an LZ on the hotel roof. Everyone else were going shopping." "Shopping?" Petrov's voice crackled over the command frequency. "For SAMs. I want every missile shot at us. Can't hit what they don't have." What followed was 15 minutes of controlled insanity. Alex and her 5 helicopters flew patterns designed to draw maximum fire while being just evasive enough to survive. They flew through buildings, literally through them, entering one side and exiting the other. They used controlled crashes to create debris barriers. They turned the entire city into a 3-dimensional battlefield. When the last stinger had been fired and dodged, Dmitri's team had secured the hotel roof. The wounded were being loaded. "Badger 6 is airborne," Dmitri reported. "All personnel extracted." "Outstanding. Reaper flight time to leave." But as they climbed toward safety, Alex saw something that made her blood freeze. 3 helicopters approaching from the east, not theirs. "Contact east, 3 Apaches, 2 clicks, and closing, American Apaches." But these weren't friendlies. The IFF showed them as Iraqi army, but Alex knew better. These were stolen helicopters probably operated by Iranian mercenaries. "They have us outgunned," Dmitri said. "They have us outgunned if we fight fair." Alex smiled coldly. "Who said anything about fighting fair?" She turned her helicopter toward the approaching threats, accelerating. The others followed, trusting her, even though it seemed like suicide. "When I say break, everyone scatter. Make them choose targets. Whoever they don't choose, kill them." The Apaches opened fire at maximum range, their superior weapons systems giving them the advantage. Or so they thought. "Break." 12 helicopters scattered in 12 directions, some climbing, some diving, some going lateral. The 3 Apaches hesitated for one crucial second, trying to prioritize targets. Alex used that second. She'd deliberately flown straight at them before breaking, getting inside their minimum engagement range. Now she was below them, where their weapons couldn't depress enough to target her. She fired everything she had straight up. One Apache took the full barrage to its belly, exploding instantly. The other 2 tried to evade, but Dmitri and Mikhail were already positioned, having anticipated their escape routes. The second Apache died to Dmitri's missiles. The third tried to run, but flew straight into Victor's guns. 3 stolen Apaches destroyed in less than 30 seconds. "Reaper flight, form up. We're going home." The flight back was quiet, each pilot processing what they'd just done. They'd executed tactics that shouldn't have worked, survived situations that should have killed them, and defeated superior enemies through sheer audacity. As they landed at the Kazakhstan base, Alex could see Petrov waiting with his entire command staff. There were also new faces, Chinese observers, she noted, and at least one American CIA operative trying to blend in. Word was spreading. The impossible was becoming possible. 40 personnel saved, Petrov said as she climbed down. 3 enemy helicopters destroyed, and you only lost 1 aircraft with the pilot surviving. This is Tuesday, Alex finished. This is Tuesday. By Sunday, they'll be doing this without me. She gathered her 12 pilots, 11 now, with Andrei injured, but alive. You graduated today, not because you followed orders, but because you stopped thinking about what you couldn't do and started thinking about what needed to be done. She looked each of them in the eye. You're not students anymore. You're evolution. Use it wisely. Dmitri stepped forward and did something unexpected. He saluted not the Russian salute, but the American one. "Thank you, Reaper, for showing us how to laugh at death." She returned the salute, then laughed that cold, dangerous sound that had started all of this. "Don't thank me yet. You've learned to hunt like reapers. Now you have to live with the consequences. Every military in the world will want to know what you know. Every pilot will want to fight you or learn from you. You've become weapons that think. That's the most dangerous thing in any arsenal." As she walked back to her quarters, Boomer fell into step beside her. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "Morrison just sent word. The Chinese want you next. They're offering 50 million. And the Israelis are offering 60, the British 70. Alex, you've started an arms race, except the weapon is you." She stopped, looking back at the Russian pilots still celebrating their survival. "Good. Let them bid. Let them all learn, because the more people who know these tactics, the less likely anyone is to start a war. Mutually assured destruction worked for nuclear weapons. Maybe it'll work for this too. Or maybe you've just made war more terrible." "War was always terrible, Boomer. I just made it honest. No more hiding behind altitude and speed. Now it's personal. Now it's pilots looking into each other's eyes as they kill or die." Her phone rang. Morrison. "Riley, pack your bags. You're needed in Taiwan. Yesterday." "Taiwan." "The Chinese are massing helicopters on the coast, hundreds of them. They claim it's an exercise, but," he paused, "they're flying your patterns, Alex. Somehow they've already learned what you taught the Russians." Alex felt a chill run down her spine. Evolution didn't wait. It spread like wildfire, jumping from mind to mind, pilot to pilot. "How many helicopters, sir?" 400 and counting. "And Taiwan has gun 40. 10-1 odds. In conventional warfare, impossible. But conventional warfare had died in Afghanistan when she'd laughed at those fighter jets. "I'll be there in 12 hours. She hung up and found Petrov watching her from across the tarmac. "Taiwan?" he asked, somehow knowing. "The Chinese learned too fast." "Not from us. We haven't shared anything yet." "Then how?" Petrov smiled grimly. "Because Colonel Riley, you're not the only one who figured out how to make helicopters dance. You're just the first one who proved it in combat, but others have been thinking, theorizing, preparing. Your victory in Afghanistan didn't start something new, it gave permission for something that was already growing." "Evolution," she whispered. "Evolution. And like all evolution, it can't be stopped. Only directed." She looked at the sky, where the sun was setting over the steppes of Kazakhstan. Somewhere, hundreds of Chinese pilots were practicing her techniques. Somewhere else, Taiwanese pilots were preparing to die. And somewhere in America, her own students were probably wondering where their teacher had gone. The world had changed in that canyon in Afghanistan, but the change was just beginning. The C-130 transport plane shuddered through another pocket of turbulence as Alex studied the satellite images of the Chinese helicopter formations. 400 helicopters arranged in patterns. She recognized her patterns, but evolved, adapted, improved. Someone had been watching, learning, waiting. The plane banked sharply toward Taiwan, and through the window she could see the first signs of dawn breaking over the Taiwan Strait. In 6 hours, if intelligence was right, those 400 helicopters would launch. "You're not sleeping," Boomer observed from across the cargo hold, where he was checking their equipment for the 5th time. "Sleep is for people who don't have 400 enemy helicopters knowing their tactics. They don't know everything. They can't. It's only been 2 weeks since Afghanistan." Alex pulled up a video on her tablet, Chinese state television from 3 days ago. It showed helicopter formations executing perfect replicas of her canyon maneuvers. "They've been watching longer than we thought. Look at the timestamp." Boomer leaned over, his face paling. "That's from 6 months ago, before Afghanistan. Someone else figured it out independently, My fight just gave them confirmation it could work. She stood pacing the narrow cargo hold. We're not fighting copycats, Boomer. We're fighting parallel evolution. The loadmaster appeared from the cockpit. Colonel Riley, we're 20 minutes out. Taiwanese command is requesting you proceed directly to their operations center. Negative. Take us to their helicopter base. I need to see what we're working with. Ma'am, they're expecting a miracle worker. They're getting a warrior who needs to evaluate her weapons. The base, Sergeant. The descent into Hualien Air Base was rough crosswinds from an approaching storm system battering the transport. As they touched down, Alex could see the Taiwanese helicopters, 40 AH-64E Apache Guardians. The most advanced variant, but their pilots were standing around them like pallbearers at a funeral. She jumped from the cargo ramp before it fully lowered Boomer, struggling to keep pace. A Taiwanese general approached, his face etched with exhaustion and desperation. Colonel Riley, I am General Chen Wei. We are honored. General, when did your pilots last fly? Yesterday, but morale is, get them airborne. Now, all of them. Colonel, they've been training for 72 hours straight. They need rest. Alex turned to face him fully, and something in her eyes made him step back. General, in 5 hours, 400 helicopters are going to cross that strait. Your pilots don't need rest. They need rage. They need to remember they're not defending Taiwan. They're already dead, and choosing how many enemies they take with them. She walked past him to the nearest Apache, where a young pilot was running diagnostics. You, what's your name? Captain Liu Ming, ma'am. Captain Liu, have you ever flown inverted? That's impossible in an Apache, ma'am. She climbed into the pilot seat. Everything's impossible until someone does it. Get in. Liu hesitated, looking at his general, who nodded. As Liu strapped into the gunner's seat, Alex was already starting the engines. She didn't wait for proper warm-up, didn't run through the full checklist. She simply lifted off and immediately rolled the Apache inverted. The helicopter screamed in protest, every warning system activating at once. Liu was shouting something in Mandarin that probably translated to prayers, but Alex held it inverted for 5 full seconds before rolling back upright. Still impossible, she asked. Liu was gripping his harness with white knuckles. How? By accepting that the Apache will kill you if you let it, so you might as well make it do impossible things before it does. She landed hard, bouncing once. Get your pilots. Class starts now. Within minutes, all 40 Taiwanese pilots had assembled. Alex could see it in their faces. They'd already accepted death. Good. That would make the next part easier. The Chinese know my tactics, she began without preamble. They've studied, adapted, improved. In a straight fight using what I taught the world, you lose. So we're not going to fight straight. She pulled out a marker and started drawing on the side of a helicopter. The Chinese learned to hunt like reapers, but they haven't learned to think like Riley. What's the difference? Captain Liu asked. Reapers kill with precision. Riley's kill with chaos. She finished her drawing, a 3-dimensional battle space with helicopters appearing from underground. There's a network of highway tunnels running under the straight approach routes. They're not on any military maps because they're technically collapsed, but collapsed doesn't mean impassable. General Chen stepped forward. Those tunnels flooded years ago. 3 feet of water. I had CIA check. Your Apaches can hover in 3 feet of water. The Chinese won't expect you to come from below sea level. A pilot raised his hand. Ma'am, helicopters in tunnels. The rotor wash alone would create a pressure wave that could destabilize anyone following you. Exactly. She turned to Chen. I need construction explosives, a lot of them. We're going to make our own exits from those tunnels exactly where the Chinese won't expect. This is insane, Chen muttered. This is evolution, General. The Chinese evolved past my Afghanistan tactics. Now we evolve past their evolution. It's an arms race where the arms are ideas. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dmitry in Kazakhstan. Chinese helicopters launching in 4 hours. Someone leaked. God help you. 4 hours, not 5. Someone on the inside was feeding the Chinese information, trying to catch them off guard. Change of plans, Alex announced. We launch in 30 minutes. 30 minutes, we haven't even... Captain Liu, pick your best 20 pilots. The other 20 stay here as reserve. General Chen, I need those explosives now. Boomer, prep our Apache with every piece of recording equipment we have. We're going to document this for the next evolution. The preparation was chaos, but focused chaos. Alex personally supervised the explosive placement in the tunnels, calculating exact positions where helicopters could burst through weakened sections. She taught Liu's 20 pilots 3 new maneuvers in 15 minutes techniques so violently counterintuitive that 2 pilots vomited just from the simulator runs. Remember, she told them as they prepared to launch, the Chinese expect Reaper tactics methodical, precise, deadly. We're going to give them Riley tactics chaos so complete they won't know which way is up. They lifted off in a diamond formation, 21 Apaches moving as one. But instead of heading toward the strait, Alex led them inland toward the tunnel entrances. The descent into darkness was terrifying. Rotor blades just feet from concrete walls, water spraying everywhere, the echo of engines creating a deafening cacophony. Reaper 1, this is Taiwan Command. Satellite shows 200 Chinese helicopters already airborne heading for our coastline. Copy, Command. We're going shopping. Shopping for souls. And she navigated the tunnel system by memory and instinct, the other Apaches following in a line. The water was higher than reported, in some sections 4 feet, not 3. The helicopters' bellies actually touched the surface, throwing up massive sprays that reduced visibility to 0. One pilot clipped a support beam, sending concrete chunks flying. Steady, Alex called. We're almost there. Through her instruments, she could see they were now under the strait, actually below sea level, traveling through a tunnel that officially didn't exist toward an exit they were about to create. Demolition in 10 seconds, she announced. When we breach, climb vertical immediately. The pressure differential will try to suck you back down. She triggered the explosives. The tunnel roof exploded upward in a geyser of water, concrete, and earth. Alex firmed her grip on the controls and climbed through the chaos, the Apache fighting against the sudden pressure change. She burst from the earth like a demon rising from hell directly beneath the lead formation of Chinese helicopters. The Chinese pilot's shock was audible over the radio frequencies, panicked shouts in Mandarin as 21 Apaches materialized from what looked like the ocean itself, firing as they climbed. Alex's first burst caught a Z-10 completely by surprise, the cannon rounds tearing through its belly armor. It exploded, raining debris on its wingman. Captain Liu got another, then another, his Apache dancing through the air with newfound grace. Break and hunt, Alex commanded. The Taiwanese pilots scattered, each becoming an independent agent of chaos. They flew patterns that made no sense, attacked from angles that shouldn't exist, used the debris from destroyed helicopters as additional weapons. But the Chinese had numbers. For every helicopter destroyed, 5 more appeared. Alex found herself surrounded by 6 Z-19s, all converging on her position. Instead of evading, she climbed straight up, then cut her engines. The Apache fell backward in a perfect arc, her guns tracking targets the entire time. 2 Z-19s collided, trying to avoid her unexpected trajectory. She restarted the engines just in time to avoid the ocean, the impact spray actually shorting out another Chinese helicopter's electronics. Reaper 1, this is Liu. They're adapting, boxing us in. He was right. The Chinese pilots were learning in real time, adjusting their tactics to counter the chaos. Evolution in motion. Time for Riley. Special number 3, Alex announced. All units mirrors out. This was something she'd developed just for this battle. Each Taiwanese Apache had been equipped with high-intensity mirrors on extending arms. They deployed them now, creating a confusing array of reflections in the morning sun. The Chinese formation hesitated, unsure which targets were real. In that moment of confusion, Alex led a coordinated strike that destroyed 12 more helicopters. But they kept coming. Wave after wave, learning, adapting. One Chinese pilot actually managed to match her inverted flight firing at her, while both helicopters flew upside down over the strait. She killed him with respect, a clean shot through his cockpit. Reaper Flight Phase 2. Return to tunnels. Ma'am, they'll follow us. That's the idea. She dove back toward the hole they'd blasted the surviving Taiwanese Apaches following. Sure enough, 30 Chinese helicopters pursued them into the tunnel system. But Alex had prepared for this. The pressure waves from multiple helicopters in the confined space created a harmonic resonance that started shaking the tunnel walls. Concrete began falling. The lead Chinese pilot tried to abort, but momentum carried him forward into a support column. The chain reaction was spectacular. The tunnel collapsed section by section, trapping or destroying 28 Chinese helicopters. Alex and her pilots escaped through secondary exits they'd prepared, emerging in different locations to continue the fight. 3 hours. That's how long the battle raged. By the end, Alex had personally destroyed 17 helicopters. Liu had 12 kills. The Taiwanese force of 21 had faced over 200 Chinese attackers and destroyed 73 while losing only 6 of their own. The Chinese retreated, their invasion postponed, if not cancelled. But Alex knew this was just the beginning. Landing back at Hualien, she found General Chen waiting with someone unexpected. General Morrison, her American commander, and beside him a woman in a flight suit with colonel's insignia and a face that made Alex's blood run cold. "Colonel Riley," Morrison said formally. "Meet Colonel Zhang Wei, People's Liberation Army Air Force. She's the one who developed the Chinese helicopter doctrine. She wants to talk." Zhang Wei stepped forward, and Alex saw her own eyes reflected back the eyes of someone who'd evolved past human limitations. "Colonel Riley," Zhang said in perfect English, "your demonstration today was impressive. My pilots learned much. Your pilots died much. Death is education. You taught me that." Zhang smiled, cold as winter. "I studied your Afghanistan fight for months before you ever flew it. I knew someone would eventually prove my theories. You just happened to be first." "Parallel evolution," Alex said. "Precisely. And now I propose something that will terrify both our governments. A joint training exercise. Your methods and mine combined. Imagine what we could create together." Morrison stepped forward. "Absolutely not. Colonel Riley, we're leaving." "With respect, General," Alex interrupted. "You brought me here to stop an invasion. I did. Now, Colonel Zhang is offering something more valuable than peace. She's offering evolution without bloodshed. It's treason. It's survival. If we don't learn from each other, we'll just keep killing each other with increasingly creative methods. But if we train together, maybe we create something so terrifying that no one dares use it." Zhang nodded. "Mutually assured evolution. Beautiful." "You're both insane?" Morrison said. "Yes," they answered in unison, then laughed, both with that same cold, predatory sound that had become Alex's signature. Captain Liu approached hesitantly. "Colonel Riley, the men want to know what happens now." Alex looked at the gathered pilots, Taiwanese, the arriving Americans, even some Chinese who'd landed rather than retreating, all waiting for her answer. Now we stop being different armies and start being evolution itself. Tomorrow, anyone who wants to learn meets here. No flags, no politics, just pilots learning to make the impossible possible. General Chen started to object, but his phone rang. He answered, his face going pale. The Japanese want to send pilots. The Indians too. The Australians are already en route. He looked at Alex with something between fear and awe. What have you started? Not started, General. Accelerated. This was always going to happen. The only question was whether it happened through combat or cooperation. That night, Alex stood on the flight line watching helicopters from different nations landing. Enemies becoming students, warriors becoming evolution. Boomer stood beside her, shaking his head. Your father would either be incredibly proud or absolutely horrified, he said. Both. He always said the best weapons were the ones that ended wars before they started. Well, we're about to create pilots so dangerous that war itself becomes obsolete. Or we create the most devastating conflict in history. Either way, we've changed everything. Her phone rang. Dmitri from Kazakhstan. Reaper, you need to know Petrov's coming to Taiwan, with all the Wagner pilots. He says if evolution is happening, Wagner will not be left behind. She laughed genuinely this time, not the cold combat laugh, but something almost warm. Let him come. Let them all come. By dawn, there were 300 helicopters at Hualien Air Base from 17 different nations. Former enemies sharing techniques, pirates learning from military, mercenaries teaching regular forces. Alex gathered them all in the main hangar. 300 of the deadliest pilots on Earth, all looking to her for guidance. Welcome to Evolution Day 1, she announced. Forget your flags. Forget your old loyalties. From this moment, you're not Russian or American or Chinese or Taiwanese. You're the future of aerial warfare, and that future has one rule: there are no rules except those physics enforces. She pulled out a tablet showing a maneuver that shouldn't be possible. 2 helicopters flying in perfect synchronization, while connected by a steel cable, creating a flying clothesline capable of cutting through anything in its path. This is Day 1 basics. By Day 7, you'll be doing things that will make this look like kindergarten. Some of you will quit. Some might die. But those who survive will be gods of the air. Jiang Wei stepped forward. I have something to add. She showed her own tablet helicopters flying in formations that created electromagnetic pulses, disabling electronics for miles. My contribution to evolution. Then Petrov arriving with his Wagner contingent, and this, helicopters using controlled crashes to create earthquake effects, destabilizing ground targets. One by one, pilots from different nations shared techniques they'd developed, in secret hoarded as national advantages. Now, in this hangar, all secrets were being revealed. This is insane, someone said from the back. Alex turned to identify the speaker, a young American pilot from her original Fort Rucker training group. Yes, Lieutenant, it is insane. War is insane. We're just making it so insane that sane people won't start it. She addressed everyone again. In 1 week, each of you will be capable of destroying entire squadrons single-handedly. Imagine a world where every pilot can do what I did in Afghanistan, what we did today over the strait. Would anyone dare start a war? Or everyone would, Jiang observed. Mutual evolution could lead to mutual annihilation. Then we'd better make sure we evolve faster than our politicians' stupidity. Alex pulled up one final image, her father's helicopter, the one he'd died in. James Riley believed helicopters were support aircraft. He died never knowing they could be apex predators. We're here to prove him wrong and ensure no one else dies from that ignorance. The crowd was silent, processing. Then Dmitri started clapping slow and rhythmic. Liu joined. Then Zhang. Soon all 300 pilots were applauding, the sound echoing through the hangar like thunder. General Morrison pulled Alex aside. "The Pentagon is having a meltdown. The President wants to know what the hell you think you're doing." "Preventing World War IV, sir." "What happened to World War III?" "We're fighting it right now, General. Not with bullets, but with ideas. And so far, we're winning." Outside, the sun was rising over 300 helicopters from 17 nations. Their pilots' former enemies were already sharing stories, comparing techniques. The evolution had begun, and it couldn't be stopped. Alex walked among them, listening to conversations in a dozen languages, all saying the same thing: the world had changed. The girl who'd laughed at death in Afghanistan had become something more than a pilot, more than a warrior. She'd become evolution itself. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Impressive work, Colonel Riley. But evolution has opposition. Forces that profit from conventional war won't appreciate what you're building. Watch your six. A friend." She deleted the message, but kept the warning in mind. Evolution always had enemies, those who profited from the status quo, from predictable conflicts with acceptable losses. But looking at these pilots, former enemies now united in pursuit of impossible flight, she knew they'd already won the most important battle. They'd proven that evolution could be chosen, not just endured. Captain Liu approached with a question that had clearly been bothering him. "Colonel, what happens when we've all evolved? When every pilot can do the impossible?" "Then we evolve again, Captain. We find new impossibilities and make them possible. That's what humans do. We adapt, overcome, and transcend. My father thought he knew the limits of helicopter warfare. I proved him wrong. Someday someone will prove me wrong. That's not failure, that's progress." The morning sun caught the rotors of 300 helicopters, creating a forest of shadows and light. Somewhere in that forest, the future of warfare was being born. Not bigger bombs or faster jets, but pilots who'd learned to laugh at death and dance with impossibility. And at the center of it all, Alexandra Reaper Riley stood ready to teach them the most important lesson of all in the air. Death was certain, but how you died, that was a choice. The evolution revolution had begun. The explosion ripped through the hangar at 0300 hours, sending Alex rolling from her cot before her conscious mind even registered the danger. Flames licked through the structure where just hours before, 300 pilots from 17 nations had been sharing their secrets. She grabbed her sidearm and rushed outside to find chaos helicopters burning, pilots scrambling, and in the smoke figures in black tactical gear moving with military precision. "Contact left!" Boomer's voice cut through the confusion as he opened fire on 2 attackers trying to plant charges on a fuel depot. His rounds caught one, but the other dove behind cover and returned fire with an automatic weapon that sent Boomer diving behind a concrete barrier. Alex sprinted toward the flight line, where Zhang Wei was already in her helicopter engines, spinning up despite the damage to her tail rotor. "Riley, they're trying to destroy everything, all the helicopters, all the data." A round sparked off the Apache's armor inches from Zhang's head. Alex traced the muzzle flash to a sniper position on the control tower roof and put 3 rounds center mass. The shooter tumbled from his perch, but 2 more immediately took his place. "How many?" Alex shouted. "At least 40. Professional military contractors. Someone doesn't want our evolution to succeed." Dimitri's Mi-28 suddenly roared overhead, its cannon lighting up the night as he strafed the attacking positions. But even as he suppressed one group, another team emerged from a drainage tunnel nobody had known existed, firing RPGs at the grounded aircraft. Alex dove into her Apache, starting the engines, while bullets starred the canopy glass. Captain Liu was trying to reach his helicopter 50 meters away when an explosion knocked him flat. She saw him struggle to rise, blood streaming from a head wound, only to collapse as a black-clad figure stood over him with a rifle aimed at his head. The rage that filled Alex in that moment was beyond cold. It was the absolute zero of killing intent. She rotated the Apache's gun and fired the 30mm rounds, turning the would-be executioner into mist. Liu dragged himself behind cover as she lifted off the helicopter, taking multiple hits but holding together. "All pilots emergency scramble," she broadcast. "If you can fly, get airborne. If you can't find cover and return fire." The battle that followed was unlike anything she'd experienced. This wasn't helicopter versus helicopter, or even helicopter versus jet. This was helicopters versus a coordinated ground assault by professionals who knew exactly how to kill aircraft. They had thermal jammers to defeat targeting systems, frequency hoppers to block communications, and enough firepower to level the entire base. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd attacked at night, thinking darkness was their advantage. They didn't know that Alex had spent the previous evening teaching the gathered pilots how to fly by sound alone, navigating by the echo of their rotors off buildings, a technique she'd developed in Iraq when sandstorms had reduced visibility to zero. "All aircraft go dark," she commanded, switching off every external light and relying purely on instinct and acoustic navigation. Around her, helicopters vanished into the darkness, becoming invisible predators. The attackers had night vision, but night vision required some light to amplify. The pilots had given them none, shutting down even their instrument panels, flying by feel and sound alone. The first indication the ground forces had that death was upon them was the hurricane of rotor wash milliseconds before the guns opened up. Petrov's voice crackled through on an encrypted channel he shouldn't have known. "Northwest corner, Riley. They've got a command vehicle." She banked hard, following his directions, and found it an armored communications truck coordinating the entire assault. She could destroy it, but that wouldn't tell her who was behind this. Instead, she did something insane, even by her standards. She landed the Apache directly on top of the vehicle, the helicopter's weight crushing its roof, trapping whoever was inside. Jumping from the cockpit, she shot the lock off the rear door and entered to find 3 men frantically trying to destroy hard drives. She put rounds through 2 computer terminals and pressed her pistol against the lead operator's temple. "Who sent you? Go to hell." She shot his colleague in the knee, the man's scream echoing in the confined space. "Wrong answer. Who sent you? You don't understand," the leader gasped. "You're disrupting everything. Arms deals worth billions. Defense contracts. The entire military-industrial complex depends on predictable warfare. What you're creating. Evolution. Chaos. If every pilot can do what you do, traditional military procurement becomes obsolete. No more $100 million jets when a modified helicopter with the right pilot can destroy them. No more Zhang Wei's helicopter suddenly appeared beside them, her spotlight illuminating a squad of attackers trying to flank Alex's position. Zhang's gunner eliminated them with surgical precision. "Finish your interrogation, Riley," Zhang called. "We've got more problems. Satellites show military convoys approaching from 3 directions. Someone's called in government forces." "Whose government? Does it matter?" "Someone wants us stopped." Alex zip-tied the operative and sprinted back to her Apache. As she lifted off, she could see the full scope of the battle. Half the hangars were burning. At least 60 helicopters were destroyed or damaged. Bodies littered the tarmac, both attackers and pilots who'd never made it to their aircraft. But the survivors were giving the attackers hell. Dmitri and 3 other Wagner pilots were conducting synchronized attack runs that left nowhere to hide. Liu, despite his head wound, had managed to get airborne and was using his helicopter's rotor wash to literally blow attackers off rooftops. Even pilots whose aircraft were destroyed had grabbed rifles and formed defensive positions. "Reaper 1, this is Morrison." Her radio crackled. "I'm 5 minutes out with Marine reinforcements. What's your status?" "We're holding, but barely. Someone really doesn't want this evolution to happen, General." "I know. I've got senators screaming about unauthorized military cooperation defense contractors threatening to pull funding, and 3 allied nations demanding your immediate arrest. And I'm pretending my radio is broken. Hold for 5 more minutes." But they didn't have 5 minutes. A new sound cut through the battle jet engines. 2 F-16s appeared on the horizon, closing fast. "All helicopters disperse," Alex commanded. But there was nowhere to go. The jets would be on them in seconds, and unlike Afghanistan, these pilots knew what they were hunting. Then Zhang Wei did something that shouldn't have been possible. She flew her damaged helicopter directly at the lead F-16, climbing into its path. The jet pilot, faced with the choice of collision or evasion, jinked hard right directly into the path of Petrov's Mi-28, which had somehow positioned itself perfectly. Petrov fired everything he had. The F-16's pilot ejected as his aircraft disintegrated, but the second jet was already locking onto Zhang's helicopter. Alex watched the missile leave its rail, tracked its path, and knew Zhang was dead. Unless Alex fired her own missile, not at the jet, but at the incoming missile. The 2 projectiles met in mid-air, the explosion close enough to Zhang's helicopter to send it spinning, but not destroy it. She fought for control, actually managing to land despite having no tail rotor and half her engine cowling, blown off. The remaining F-16 circled for another run, but now 20 helicopters were rising to meet it, moving in a pattern they'd practiced just hours before, a 3-dimensional spiral that gave the jet pilot no angle of attack without exposing himself to return fire. He fired 2 more missiles, but the helicopters scattered in perfect synchronization, the missiles finding nothing but empty air. "Fighter pilot," Alex broadcast on the emergency frequency. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Riley. Break off your attack." "Negative, Riley. I have orders to neutralize all aircraft at this location." "From who? Does it matter?" "It does if you want to survive the next 60 seconds. She wasn't bluffing. The helicopters had formed a kill box around the F-16, each one positioned to cover the other's blind spots. The jet had speed and altitude, but it was 1 against 20, and these weren't ordinary pilots anymore. "This is General Morrison to unidentified F-16. You are engaging United States military personnel. Break off immediately or be declared hostile." "Sir, my orders." "Your orders are now changed. RTB immediately." The F-16 hesitated, then banked away afterburners, glowing as it fled. But the damage was done. The base was in ruins, dozens were dead or wounded, and the fragile alliance of international pilots was shattered. Or so it seemed. As the smoke cleared and the sun rose, Alex saw something that made her throat tight with emotion. The pilots weren't separating by nationality. Americans were helping wounded Russians. Chinese pilots were sharing medical supplies with Taiwanese. Wagner mercenaries were putting out fires alongside Japanese self-defense force personnel. The attack had tried to divide them. Instead, it had united them in a way no training ever could have. Captain Liu approached a bandage wrapped around his head, supported by Dmitri. "Colonel Riley, the men want to know, do we continue?" Before she could answer, helicopters began appearing on the horizon. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Apache longbows from South Korea. Tiger helicopters from Germany. Hinds from India. Word of the attack had spread, and the response wasn't fear, it was defiance. A German pilot she'd never met landed and immediately approached her. "Colonel Riley, we heard someone tried to stop the evolution. We're here to make sure it continues." Within 3 hours, there were over 500 helicopters at what remained of Hualien Air Base. pilots from 30 nations, including some that were technically at war with each other. They worked together to clear debris, set up temporary shelters, and establish defensive positions. General Morrison arrived with his Marines to find not chaos, but order 500 of the world's best pilots working as one unit transcending politics and nationalism in pursuit of something greater. "This is impossible," he muttered. "That word's lost all meaning, General," Alex replied. She was exhausted, covered in soot and blood, some hers, most not, but her eyes burned with purpose. "Someone sent mercenaries and fighters to stop us. They failed. The question now is whether governments support evolution or oppose it." Morrison's phone rang. He listened, his face cycling through surprise, disbelief, and finally resignation. "That was the president. She wants to know if you can teach Secret Service pilots these techniques. Apparently the attempted assassination last month has her rethinking aerial security. Tell her I'll teach anyone who's ready to evolve." Jiang Wei approached her arm in a sling from her crash landing. "The Chinese government has a similar request, as do the Russians, the British, the Israelis." She smiled. "We've started something that can't be stopped." But there was one more surprise coming. A lone helicopter appeared on the horizon, flying erratically. As it got closer, Alex could see why it was shot to pieces, barely holding together. It crashed rather than landed, and from the wreckage stumbled someone Alex never expected to see again. Her mother. Sarah Riley, 62-year-old civilian nurse, had somehow acquired a military helicopter and flown it through a war zone to reach her daughter. "Mom, what are you?" "Your father taught me to fly before you were born," Sarah said, collapsing into Alex's arms. "When I heard about the attack, I couldn't just sit at home. I had to know you were alive. You flew through combat airspace in a stolen helicopter, borrowed, and yes." Sarah looked around at the assembled pilots, the burning hangars, the defiant unity. "Your father would be so proud, Alexandra. You didn't just change warfare, you changed the world." The next 3 days were a blur of organization and training. Governments that had initially opposed the international cooperation now scrambled to get their pilots included. The attack had backfired spectacularly. Instead of stopping evolution, it had accelerated it. Alex stood before the assembled pilots now, over 700 strong, for what would be her final lesson at Hualien. 3 weeks ago, I shot down 5 jets with a single Apache and laughed at death. That laugh started something, a recognition that the impossible was just undiscovered possible. Each of you has now learned to make helicopters do things their designers never imagined. But that's not the real evolution. She gestured to the mixed groups of pilots, former enemies, now teaching each other, sharing meals, telling stories. The real evolution is this, recognizing that in the air, we're not Americans or Russians or Chinese. We're pilots. We're the ones who dance with death every time we take off. That brotherhood, that sisterhood transcends all borders. That she pulled out a tablet showing satellite imagery. There are conflicts brewing in 16 locations worldwide. Traditional military forces are mobilizing, politicians are rattling sabers, defense contractors are pushing for war. But now every military in the world has pilots who've trained together, who know each other not as enemies, but as fellow evolutionaries. Tell me, how do you start a war when your pilots might refuse to fight their brothers and sisters in the air? The crowd was silent, understanding dawning. That's the real evolution. Not the tactics, not the techniques, but the recognition that we're all human pilots trying to do the impossible, and humans who've laughed at death together don't kill each other easily. General Morrison stepped forward. "Colonel Riley, the Pentagon wants you to return immediately to establish a formal training program." "With respect, sir, the program already exists. Every pilot here is now a teacher. They'll return to their nations and spread what they've learned. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy that evolution belongs to no single nation." "And you, Alex looked at her mother, at Boomer, at the pilots she'd trained and learned from. I'm going to keep evolving, sir. There are still impossibilities to discover. Jiang Wei stepped up beside her. We've been invited to Antarctica. International waters, no government jurisdiction. Scientists want to see if helicopter techniques can be adapted for extreme weather research and rescue. Antarctica. Morrison looked skeptical. The ultimate hostile environment, Alex said. If we can make helicopters dance in Antarctica's winds, we can fly anywhere. Dmitri joined them. Wagner's providing security. My men want to learn ice operations. Liu added, Taiwan's sending our best mountain rescue pilots. One by one, pilots from different nations announced their intentions, not to return to traditional military service, but to push the boundaries further to find new impossibilities to conquer. Morrison shook his head. You've started a revolution, Riley. No, sir. I just gave it a voice. It was always there, the desire to transcend limitations, to evolve past what we thought possible. Every pilot who's ever pushed their aircraft to the limit knows this feeling. I just proved it could be done. As the sun set over Taiwan, casting long shadows from hundreds of helicopters, Alex stood with her assembled pilots for one last moment. Tomorrow they would scatter to the winds, carrying evolution to every corner of the globe. But tonight, they were one force, united by the understanding that they'd been part of something historic. My father believed helicopters were support aircraft, Alex said, her voice carrying across the tarmac. He died never knowing they could be apex predators. But you know what? He was right about one thing. He told me the sky isn't the limit, it's home. And home is what we protect, no matter what flag flies over it. She raised her hand in salute, and 700 pilots saluted back, not to her rank, not to her nation, but to the evolution she represented. The next morning, as Alex prepared to depart for Antarctica, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was her father's flight wings, the ones that had been buried with him, and a note. He knew Alexandra. He always knew helicopters could be more. He was just waiting for someone brave enough to prove it, make the impossible possible, a friend who knew James Riley. She pinned the wings to her flight suit beside her own. Father and daughter, past and future, united in the evolution of warfare. Boomer found her standing beside her Apache, running her hand along its scarred fuselage. Ready for Antarctica. Ready for whatever comes next. Even if it's impossible, she laughed, not the cold combat laugh, but something warmer, more human. Especially if it's impossible. That's when things get interesting. As her Apache lifted off, followed by 30 others from a dozen nations, Alex looked back one last time at the base, where everything had changed. The burned hangars were already being rebuilt, stronger than before. The pilots who remained were already practicing new techniques, pushing further boundaries. Evolution couldn't be stopped. It could only be directed. And Alexandra Reaper Riley, the woman who'd laughed at death and taught the world to fly impossible, was ready to direct it toward something greater than war. She was ready to direct it toward transcendence. The Apache banked south toward Antarctica, toward new impossibilities, toward the next evolution. Behind her, the sun rose over Taiwan, illuminating a sky that would never be the same. In that light, every helicopter looked like it could dance with death and win. The evolution was complete. The revolution had just begun. And somewhere in the sky, the ghost of James Riley flew alongside his daughter, proud that she'd made the impossible possible, that she'd turned support aircraft into apex predators, that she'd changed not just how helicopters flew, but why humans fought. The Reaper had become evolution itself, and evolution always won.